Welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast, where we talk about fitness, health, and anything to help you become the most optimal human beings. Let's dive into it.
Hey, real quick before we start the podcast, if you have listened to more than one episode, can you do me a favor and rate and review the show? Now, I'm not big on asking for favors, but we really want to get this podcast listed in the top of all health and fitness podcasts, not just the fitness category. This will take you less than a minute, and if you could do that, that would make us friends forever. And since we refuse all sponsors on the show, this will be my only ask rather than telling you to go check out some supplement or product we don't actually believe in, like every other podcast out there. So please rate and review. Okay, that's it. To the podcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. Jerred Moon here with Joe Courtney. What's up, Joe?
How you doing, man?
Doing pretty well. So today we're going to kind of be talking about frameworks for getting better at things, practicing, learning new skills, developing new skills. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because we have been doing fitness for a long time. You and I, most of the team, and even a lot of our veteran athletes have been around for a long time. But we don't talk about how to develop the skills you need to be good at fitness, how to find that time, and when would you practice? Because if you come into our program, the expectation is to do the programming. But what if you can't do a double under? What if you don't have the best form on a back squat or front squat or cleans, or you've never heard of an exercise? There's definitely a learning curve to these things. And so I kind of, we're going to go down maybe more of like a stroll down memory lane for Joe and I, about how we learned, developed, and practiced new skills to get better at things. And, what we would do if we were trying to learn a new skill right now, which we were kind of talking before the podcast. We haven't really been pushing ourselves in that area. We've more been following the program and not as concerned with like developing a new specific skill. But I would say in recent history that has been true for me, and I'll talk more about it. But I want to give it to you first, Joe. You weren't always good at everything, and so how did you develop this? How did you develop the skills that you have now? Perfect form, because this isn't like a CrossFit conversation. We're talking about skills necessarily. I'm not asking you like how do you learn how to walk on your hands? I'm not really talking about that. It's like when we program back squats, our expectation 100% of the time is that every repetition is a good, solid back squat rep. So how do you get to that level where you're comfortable with that? And things like that. So I would just throw it to you, man. Like, what are your thoughts on this? How have you developed skills and form over the years?
Well, I think with every movement, you really have to break it down little by little, and you need to get eyes on yourself doing it. So whether if you are completely by yourself, you don't have a friend or a coach to look at it, then you got to just try it out, video yourself doing it, a couple of reps for a little bit, different angles, and then see how you are, and then compare that to somebody that is, whether it's good, efficient, that you're trying to mimic yourself off of, and compare and contrast, see where you kind of fail, and try and kind of tweak yourself a little bit there. But you also need to have a little bit of outside help to ask help for specific areas. And when you talked about that part, it's like asking for help can be open up a can of worms, because you can get some pretty bad advice too, and just conflicting advice, because cues are different for everyone. You can tell somebody one cue and it works perfectly, and then tell somebody another cue and it doesn't. So when it comes to advice, I wouldn't go out to be like, hey, how do I get better at dumbbell unders? It's more of like, hey, how do I get better at my swing on double unders? How do I keep my hands in a certain position on double unders? If you specify, we'll video you and yourself and see where you mess up. Specifying the specific point that you need to improve on will get you better applicable advice, because somebody might tell you something else and you change what you're doing, but you're actually doing something right for what they said to do. So that's definitely one way. And just being able to always videoing yourself can help. I still, from time to time, just because I don't do a whole lot of cleans and that stuff, I'll video my cleans as I'm warming up to weight if I want to start to do some heavy weight, because you just getting out of practice. There's so many moving parts when it comes to a clean, especially a full squat clean, that I just need to double check what I'm doing, how much my hips are extending, when I'm actually pulling with my arms. And then when I specifically see one of those areas break down, I will do a drill to mitigate that breakdown. So I will do something to make sure that my hips are fully extending, just to, like, whether it's overemphasis or that I'm not pulling too early. Um, so in that little bit of video feedback and video cues and asking some advice here and there. And sometimes it could also just be a mobility thing, whether it's certain squats. I know I guess I was always kind of like form wise, and being able to control my body with lifting, I was fine. It was just like mobility wise, squats, especially front squats, just working on the mobility side of it. If you see like, oh well, I'm not, as I come down, my heels are coming off the ground because my ankles aren't as mobile, or the front squat, my elbows are completely falling down because I can't, I just don't have the mobility to keep my elbows up. And so working on the mobility side, that'll also be insightful to be like, well, my form's fine, but my mobility just sucks. Maybe I just need to work on my mobility. But when it comes to double unders, yeah, break down the movement little by little, try and ask a little bit of specific advice, and then compare and contrast your video with possibly another video.
Hey, quick break here. As you know, we will not accept sponsors on this podcast. We want to keep it content focused and just deliver the best we can to you. So, if you think this podcast is worth listening to, can you do me a favor and share it with one friend? I don't care how you share it. You can text it to a friend, Instagram, DM, email, or even snail mail, but I can't reimburse you for that stamp. Look, the best way for a podcast to continue to grow is word of mouth. So if you can share this episode with at least one person, I would be forever grateful. All right, back to the show.
Yeah, I think you bring up some really good points of not just being like, I suck at this thing, how to get better at this thing. You might have to break it down into either specific where you're hitting like a problem. Like everybody can squat. I'll go ahead and say most everybody can squat, but you might have a different reason your squat is not perfect compared to someone else. It could very well be that your knees dive in, or you're not going low enough. Like, and there are a lot of those things videos can clean up, and you can go check other things, but you do need to break down the movement. So I think that's really good. For garage gym athletes looking to get better at something, maybe there is a skill that you don't have. I know I was obsessive about this stuff pretty early on. Like I would go work out. Like you can do most things pretty safely, but then if I was like, you know what, I don't think my deadlift's the best, or my back squat, or whatever. Yeah, I would go home. I'd watch videos. I'd use a PVC pipe and practice and practice and practice over just to get that muscle memory. And I think making a short list is the first step I would recommend to garage gym athletes. So like, what are your top three? Don't make a list of like 50 things that you want to get better at. Maybe just three. Be like, you know what, my back squat could be better. I want to get better at double unders, and one other, my deadlift or my press. Something, just to keep it simple. Make that list, and then you need to start throwing it up into your training. And Joe mentioned he will video himself doing a clean, and then work on that if he needs to. And it sounds like that's all in your warm up, right? So like that's a great place to throw these things in there and warm up, cool downs, or off days. If you still have the time to train, it's a great time to practice, and you need to be putting in that practice, because you don't always want to just be doing it in the training session, but you can. If you have no other time, then that would be my secondary recommendation, is like, you know what, I need to get better at back squats. So what am I going to do? Well, don't worry about the prescribed programming we have for you if it's like heavy, because if your back squat is no good, you have no business adding weight to it, really, or like any significant amount of weight, because weight is a magnifying glass on bad form. Like you can start with a moderate to low load on the back squat or any lift. You can muscle through it. You can do bad things, and you're not going to get injured, because the body is fairly resilient. It can put itself in imperfect situations and still function, because let's be honest, that's probably 90% of your daily life when you bend over to pick up a water bottle off the ground, or your kid, or like whatever. I guarantee you're not doing these perfect form positions to do those things. So your body's okay with it. But when you're getting to maximum loads, you're under the magnifying glass now, and things are getting stressed to their limitations. And that's typically where you're going to get injured. So that, like I said, my second recommendation, just practice perfect reps in every single training session, every single repetition, perfect. Even if that means you have to drop 30% off of our recommendation on the programming, drop the weight and do better form. And I don't really care where you're at in this. Like, you could be, I wasn't trying to gear this whole episode towards a beginner. It's really like, if you have been training for 7 years and your back squat's still not great, time to go back to the drawing board. That's kind of what happened to me. It was more at the 10-year point. I was like at the 10-year point, and I realized I had all these like bad habits. Like, my front squat wasn't good, my back squat wasn't good. I wasn't going down to depth. My knees would hurt when I would back squat heavy. My back was constantly in pain when I would do deadlifts, and it was all form. And I just kind of knew at that point, a decade into it, all these things need to change. And so a lot of them for me was evenings, like watching videos and like practicing with PVC pipe. But again, that was like pre-kids, and I'm a bit of a obsessive on a lot of things. And so if you don't have that, then do it in the training session. Now, when it comes to like a skill or whatever, double unders, yeah, again, that's a rest day thing. Maybe you can put it in place of your Meet Yourself Saturday, but just finding the time to practice and then setting those micro goals. Because when I first started doing double unders, I wasn't very good at them. But the gym I was at the time had a racquetball court in it that no one really used. And so I went in the racquetball court and I like locked myself in there with a jump rope. And I was like, I am going to do 100 unbroken double unders. And I'd already been practicing a little bit, but I think I could only string together like 8 to 10 when I decided I was going to do 100 unbroken. And so I don't remember how long I was in there, but it was a very long time. Again, this was pre-kids type stuff, so I had the time. But let's say I was in there for 2.5 hours. And I remember it was one of the harder workouts I've ever done, because think about double unders, how metabolically demanding they are just as is, and so just sit there and be like, get to 87 unbroken, and you're like, damn it, this is not 100. And then you have to rest and do it again when you're bad at double unders. That's super taxing. So that's kind of the mentality you need, that you're going to get better at it no matter what. You need to find the time to practice. But you don't have this mindset of just, I'm not good at that thing, so I avoid them or I don't do them. Like, we get questions about, what do I do if I can't do a pull-up? We give recommendations for that. What do I do if I can't do double unders? We give recommendations for that. You can't do this, we give a recommendation. But our expectation is not that you're just going to stay there and can't do those things. Like, put in the practice and the work to be able to do those things, so we don't have to give you the recommendations anymore. And I think that's speaking for every coach, not just our programming. Go get better at those things. But that's all I got. You got anything else, Joe?
Yeah, don't get hung up so much on the details of the workout, but then there's some workouts where you should take that time to practice it. Like, there's one that we do called dub copter. Literally, it's just double unders. So that's probably the time that you should be practicing it, not substituting it because you can't do it or you're not very good at it. Even if you're stuck at 10 or 20 the entire time, like, after a while, you're going to get through it. I know Liz for the longest time was at 10 or 20 forever. And then I worked with her some, gave her some tips here and there, and then like tweaking one thing at a time, and then she was able to actually get through the whole thing, a couple of months later. So yeah, just working on one thing little by little definitely helps. To, like, in our close Facebook group, people share, ask advice a lot, and share videos. So definitely sharing those videos and getting some pointers. Again, it can open up a can of worms because you'll get all different kinds of advice, but we can still help out and tweak some things here and there, as long as it's like applicable advice and not like just jump higher. Well, it's not really good
Right.
advice. You just like, you're just telling me to do better, and that's essentially all you're saying. So yeah.
All right, so go practice, put in the time, get better at the skills. Don't have any limiting factors holding you back from really truly experiencing the programming as it should be. But that's it. That's all we got for today. If you're on YouTube watching this right now, if you could subscribe to the channel, whenever a new video comes out, you'll be alerted about that. Leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any additional questions, we can turn that into future episodes, or we can just interact and see how you're doing. And also, a thumbs up helps out a lot. If you are a podcast listener, which is the majority of people right now, go ahead, if you could, leave a 5-star review and a positive comment. As you've heard us, it interjecting more into the show, share this with a friend, at least one other person. We'd be, really grateful if you could do that. But that's it, guys. Thanks for watching or listening.
For listening to the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. If you want to learn more, go to garagegymathlete.com. You can learn about our training. Let us send you a copy of our book, The Garage Gym Athlete, or you can even get featured on the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. Thanks for listening.